Do I have to list my new seat dildo as a mod?
Are you talking about for your insurers?
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
Whether you like it or not, there is an inherent risk involved with our love for two wheels. Now that could be crashing, speeding, insurance, other drivers, dead badges or anything else for that matter. And we're frequently harassed for legal advice on a regular basis. We are not legal experts, which is why we've teamed up with White Dalton Motorcycle Solicitors to bring you free legal advice.
Andrew Dalton, thanks for joining us. Andrew has saved me on numerous occasions back in my fast bikes days, and safe to say you're a bit of an expert in the legal field.
Insofar as motorbikes are concerned,
I was going to say, yeah, just motorbikes.
Just motorbikes.
So we asked you guys some questions on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Surprisingly, the better questions were from Facebook, surprisingly. I don't know, I mean, usually it's the sensible guys on Twitter, but lots of the questions, there's a frequently asked question was to do with wheelies. Now are wheelies a black and white scenario, or is there scope for, did he might have done this? Was it a high one? Was it a low one? Was it a mincy one?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
If you've performed a wheelie and you clutch it up and you're on your rear wheel for 80 metres, you're getting nicked for dangerous driving, and that's a compulsory retest.
Is it?
You're going to be banned for at least a year. Yep. And you are going to get absolutely spanked by your insurers for at least 5 years. If, for example, you're a HGV driver or a PSV driver, you're going to lose your PSV licence, your car licence, your motorcycle licence, you're up for an extended retest. You asked me if there's shades of grey. Well, the shades of grey are kind of up at the graphite end.
Right.
There's not a lot of grey below that. If, for example, you are slightly ambitious with the clutch and a little bit heavy-handed with the throttle, and the front end skips up for a couple of metres and a few inches, that's not going to be dangerous driving. The difference in the testing law is this: if what has happened can be explained away as a momentary lapse of concentration, then it isn't dangerous driving, it's careless driving.
Okay.
So you can carelessly flicker up the front wheel. Probably most of us have done it, giving it a little bit too much gun, maybe with
over
a pillion.
crest.
Yeah, over a crest, giving it a little bit too much gun with a pillion, or you've got a bloody great motorbike lock and chain on your rear seat. Also, first time you ride something like this, big thumping single, it's not impossible to inadvertently hoist the front wheel. And I have successfully defended, and I've been absolutely straight in a tiny minority of cases, I've managed to get a wheelie dropped down from a dangerous to without due care, but that's involved the police officer who is there giving evidence as to the wheelie, almost going along with the suggestions that I'm putting that it was a short wheelie, that it went on perhaps longer than it should have done because the rider wanted to get his front wheel down, not just slam it down and bend himself out of shape. And if you've got a sympathetic magistrate's court, which is pretty rare, because if you go in front of the magistrates for wheeling, it all looks like they've had a breakfast of lemons that morning. They are not going to be on your side.
Okay.
And the standard method the police use is they get a police class 1 rider, sits there in his blue tunic, he's a respectable fellow. As far as the magistrates are concerned, this man knows everything there is to know about motorcycling. He's a police class 1 motorcyclist. And he will say, this rider, in hoisting his front wheel up, has lost 60, 70, 80% of his forward vision because you got your front wheel up.
Yeah.
You've lost pretty well all your effective braking because most of your braking, as we all know, comes off the front wheel. Your front wheel's up in the air. It's kind of hard to get traction on thin air. You're endangering yourself, you're endangering others, and you have no good excuse. There is no good excuse bar one for getting your front wheel up. And the one excuse you have for getting your front wheel up is, and this is really only if you ride trails, is that if you give your front wheel a gentle hoist to get over an obstruction, that would not constitute dangerous driving, in my opinion. And the reason I say in my opinion is because it's never been tested in a higher court.
Right, okay, so it's a very, very...
That's pretty slim.
Yeah.
That is pretty slim. We've had a few over the years, and I think a few might be overstated, I think we've had one over the years, where we had an equestrian lady on horseback, unsurprisingly enough, who reported in that a motorcyclist had popped a wheelie to get over a log, which, got to be honest, I think she probably put down the byway to stop motorcyclists herself.
Okay. Yeah.
And her daughter had videoed on her iPhone and sent it on to the police.
Even on a byway?
Yeah, on a byway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, people don't like bikes on the byways.
No.
And the chap who'd popped this little wheel in, he showed me the video, and it was a tidy wheelie. There's no overstatement about it. It literally was the guy rolled up to it, compressed the front end, bounced the front end up, got it just as high as it needs to do. It was a way better wheelie than I could do. Just neat, compact, compressed, and it just did the whole thing. And the police didn't take it any further because they said, no, you're crossing an obstacle in the highway. That's not dangerous. That's not dangerous riding, because there is no offence of wheeling. There's nothing in statute.
It's dangerous driving.
It has to fit dangerous driving, which is falling far below the standards of the reasonably competent and prudent, in our case, rider. And because it's a deliberate act, a wheelie is a deliberate act. It will almost always be dangerous if it's deliberate, because it's not a momentary lapse of concentration. Like I say, the momentary lapse of concentration is giving it a bit too much beans, maybe with a pillion, maybe with some luggage on that you weren't expecting. I've run it a couple of times successfully that somebody was on a brand new bike, they weren't used to it, they weren't used to the power handling characteristics, and that's got home. Bear in mind, I've been doing this job for 25 years. It's got home twice in 25 years.
I was going to say, if there was a judge who knew the differences between a V4 and a V twin and an inline 4, is there scope for that as well? If you really... There
is, but my God, you are vanishingly lucky if you get a judge that knows that. And you've still got to get around the point that your front end was up in the air. And if your front end was up in the air for 80 metres and you're at 45 degrees, you're going down for dangerous driving and everything that follows. The ban, the retest, loss of all your licences, retest across the board. So really the basic takeaway from this is don't deliberately wheelies, don't do wheelies on the road. You're in for a shed load of trouble if you get caught.
So the judge won't go, oh mate, that's a nice wheelie.
No.
That's 10 out of 10. No.
The judge might. And peculiarly, a judge can say that if you do some absolutely legal term coming up now, ragged-ass minger of a wheelie, but you manage to get 50 metres and you're all over the road, you're swinging from side to side, it just looks atrocious. You look like you're going to flip it, the proper minger wheelie. That would actually be an aggravating factor, because the judge will say, well, not only were you wheeling, the judge won't say, and you're crap at it, but the judge will put it rather more courteously than that. But that, if anything, would be an aggravating factor, that you were obviously and objectively out of control.
Right, okay.
Whereas, for example, the lad that went over the log that I was saying to you about, it was patently obvious that guy knew exactly how to get his front wheel up to the correct level. And there was one case I did probably about 20 odd years ago now, where we ran the defence, and we were lucky. Strange enough, you're asking me about judges that understand motorcycles. It was in front of a lay bench of magistrates, and the chairman of the bench knew about motorcycles. Because when I started saying to him about different engine configurations, I could see his eyes light up. He literally sort of kind of rubbed his hands together and said, well, Mr. Dalton, this had better be good, because I know what you're talking about.
Right, okay.
So I was like, okay, so best tread a little carefully here. And the chairman of the bench went along with the idea that the lad was taken out on a test rider, a V-twin. I think it was a good few years ago now. Got a feeling it was an SV1000. And he was taking it out on a test ride.
Wheelie bike.
Yep, and front wheel came up.
Yeah.
And luckily, the police officer who nicked him, when I cross-examined the police officer, for want of a better phrase, he played the game. He said, yes, this bike is more prone to hoisting the front wheel. And one of the things the police officer said, and he didn't need to say this, and I think he felt quite sorry for our lad, because honestly, my lad in the witness box looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He couldn't actually remember his name when he was asked his name. He was in an absolute blind panic, which played quite well for the magistrates, because they knew this lad wasn't one of their regulars. He turned up in court with his ill-fitting suit and his tie done up, probably the first time he'd worn a tie since school, absolutely in a state of blind panic. The magistrates lapped it up. And they could see that this lad really was terrified of the full majesty of the law of a provincial magistrate's court. And the police officer played the game. He said, yeah, the wheelie was under control, because part of what our lad's case was that the wheelie went on longer because he'd come from a motocross background. He could wheelie, But what he did say to the magistrates, and the magistrates accepted, and a different bench, different day could have been a very different story. The magistrates accepted that he did not simply want to bam his front end down on this bike. He said,
Right.
I put it down gently, I put it down with a little bit of brake and a little bit of clutch, and put it down and carried on. Unfortunately, the vehicle that all of this happened in front of was an unmarked police car, so yeah, his world turned flashing blue, and he'd realised this was possibly the worst time he could ever have carried out a wheelie. And his story was, and the magistrates, well, kind of believed it. I'm not sure how much they really believed it, but the magistrates accepted a plea for without due care.
Really?
Which then meant no retest.
Wow.
Yep, no mandatory ban.
Wow.
Yep, and I think they gave him 21 days because his employers had said, if this lad gets banned for more than 21 days, he can't drive the works vehicle, he's out of a job. So if he takes his entire annual leave now and he comes into work because we're annoyed with him. So the magistrates knew this lad was going to get punished by all and sundry. So he played it well in court, and it wasn't him play acting. This lad was genuinely terrifying because when we came out of court, I had to tell him about 4 times what had happened. He was in such a panic, his ears had shut down. He had genuinely no idea what happened to him in court. But that, as I say, doing this job 25 years, I can think of 2 cases where we've managed to get it down like that, and those were with absolutely star witnesses, even if my witness was a gibbering wreck.
I was going to say, the next one should be, the next question should be evidence. Now, yes, if there's a copper following you and got it on camera, there's no denying it. What else? What else can be used against you? Obviously, dash cams.
Dash cams can certainly be used, yeah. Smart cams, CCTV. The CCTV we see these days is absolutely near broadcast quality. If you've been videoing it as well, they can take your video cameras away, they can take your phone away and interrogate it. They're perfectly entitled to do that under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. So really, we keep coming back to the same point. Whilst wheelies are good fun, and they're an excellent method of showing off your machine control,
just don't do them.
Just don't do them.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to do them, don't do them on the road.
Yeah.
Find yourself a field, find yourself an airstrip.
Yeah. Track.
Yeah, or even, speak nicely to somebody's got a private car park.
Yeah.
If you really want to wheelie, but the truth of the matter is, and I think you know this better than most, Al, once you've got the knack, it's not really that addiction. But it's not really that big a deal. Once you know how to do them, it's not that big a deal to keep doing them.
Yeah, true.
Well, maybe for me, because I'm a more mature and better human being than you, Al. Do you reckon that might be the reason?
Could be, mate. Could be. So the bottom line is, don't do them.
Yeah, well, certainly don't do them on the roads if you want to keep your licence and you want to be insurable for the next 5 years. It's an expensive business if it goes wrong.
Now, we do have some other questions, like I said, on Facebook. And we're going to try and do some sort of quick fire numbers, as well as a kind of general subjects. We've got some quick fire ones. So I'm going to start off with here one from Darren Savage. He thought he was being clever, but actually turns out it's quite a reasonable question. He says, do I have to list my new seat dildo as a mod?
Are you talking about for your insurers?
Yes.
Yeah, you are. I'm not sure this is a plan with absolutely no drawbacks.
No.
As a preliminary point, any modification you carry out to your standard bike, even if it is a fairly temporarily affixed sex toy, still remains a modification to the motorcycle. Yeah, and also, was Darren the lad that asked the question?
Yes. Yeah.
Darren inadvertently asks a sensible question.
Yeah.
Because if you have a pillion-mounted dildo, which is an unusual accessory, I'm not sure Touratech do one.
No.
If you do that, and just think about it for half a second, if that thing is in use and you have a crash, whoever is perched upon your sex toy is going to have some pretty serious internal injuries.
Yes.
Now, if you crash the bike as a result of your own negligence, you are liable for your unfortunate pillion who has is going to need some fairly significant surgical rebuilding after a crash.
Yeah.
If you, say for example, your pillion is female and you've compromised her fertility, you're looking at 30 or 40 grand. Indeed. Plus the pain and suffering that you will have put her through.
And the surgery.
You are talking about a claim which your insurers will have to meet of multiples of thousands of pounds. Now, your insurers are obliged as a matter of law to pay out for the damage done to, and I'm going to keep the pillion as a female, because
Just in case.
well, it was also because I can give a working idea of loss of
Okay,
fertility,
right, okay,
how
yeah.
much these injuries,
Yeah.
how much these injuries, because you're effectively talking about a traumatic hysterectomy.
Yeah.
So whilst I appreciate the question was tongue in cheek,
It's actually a pretty valid one.
it's a valid question.
Yeah.
If you do something to your bike and your insurers can say, we would have charged you more premium for this, they can be difficult about the claim. Now, for something like that, which is just bizarre and not the kind of thing they could ever reasonably foresee, they can say, we would never, ever have insured this bike with his pillion-mounted dildo. Therefore, we're not paying for anything. But we have to pay, as a matter of road traffic law, as a matter of statutory law, they have to pay your pillion her damages. But they then come after you. And they take your house off you.
Yeah.
It's so serious stuff. So
Yeah.
you might think it's, I appreciate Darren's not going to put a dildo on his bike.
He might do.
You know
yeah,
him.
I know him, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to suggest to him, as a matter of both legal advice and perhaps some gynecological advice
Yeah.
as well, probably not his best idea.
No.
That is a plan with multiple drawbacks. I really wouldn't do it.
So his pillion's probably not the only one that's going to be rogered then.
Possibly not.
Well, there you go. Don't put a dildo on your pillion seat or on your seat. Right, Andrew, thanks a lot.
No worries.
We'll be here next time and we'll catch up every few weeks. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it, guys.